You guys are familiar with La Opinión? Uh-huh. Yes. I mean, La Opinión is kind of informative, but in many ways it's like disinformative. It's like kind of brainwashes our people into accepting these terms, Latino and Hispano, and sometimes there's like articles that just really aggravate me because I constantly reading La Opinión, and some years back we were sending rebuttals or letters, like questioning or whatever. Tuesday I sent one just to see if it kind of went in, and maybe they'll publish it, but it's in Spanish and I'm trying to translate it, but it kind of came in out today, so which is good. And it says, nada que celebrar, nothing to celebrate. No fue un descubrimiento, fue una invasión. No fue una conquista, fue una masacre, y definitivamente no fue una unificación de dos culturas. Fue una violación cultural y humana. Hoy que nuevamente es el famoso Día de Acción de Gracias, Thanksgiving, hay que preguntarnos ¿por qué damos gracias? Gracias a que a consecuencia de la invasión europea en 1492 y con el uso del arma de destrucción masiva, la viruela, entre 70 a 100 millones de personas fueron masacradas en todo este hemisferio. Daremos gracias por la destrucción de nuestras ciudades, culturas y civilizaciones milenarias a manos de estos invasores. Gracias al despojo, saqueo y robo de nuestras riquezas y continente. Gracias por los términos que nos impusieron, que están cargados con prejuicios y odio como mestizaje, ladino, hijo de la chingada, etc. Chingada, of course, I didn't, just with a C. Pero más bien gracias por destruir y mancillar cualquier resonancia en nuestra memoria que nos vincula a esta cultura indígena. Esa que hoy pensamos que no nos pertenece. La realidad es que al igual como se glorifica el Día de la Raza en octubre 12, imagínense celebrando el día de nuestra propia destrucción. El Thanksgiving celebrado en esta región de nuestro continente es más que una manera de poner un sello oficial de aceptación en los hechos criminales. Pero lo más importante es que absuelve de toda culpabilidad a la gente de descendencia europea por lo que hicieron sus antepasados. El Thanksgiving es inaceptable porque al igual que otras celebraciones falsas, ridículas, ridiculizan y insultan a la gente con lazos a este continente por miles de años. Lo mismo de inaceptable sería que haya un día festivo que marque el inicio del holocausto judío a manos de los nazis. So basically it's saying that it wasn't a discovery, it was an invasion. It wasn't a conquest, it was a massacre, and most definitely it wasn't a fusion of two cultures. It was a violation of, there was cultural and a human and cultural violation. Today that Thanksgiving is upon us, let's ask ourselves, what are we really celebrating? What are we giving thanks to? Thanks to because of the fact that in 1492, with the weapon of mass destruction, which is smallpox, and that's what we should really consider, the weapon of mass destruction back then, 70 to 100 million human beings were destroyed in this continent. Should we give thanks for the destruction of our cities, cultures, and civilizations that spanned thousands of years by these invaders? Or should we give thanks to the terms that were imposed on us that are charged with racism and hate, which is mestizo, and we should add Latino and Hispano, and raza, Ladino, and son of that damned woman that basically the Spaniards raped. That's what they call those hijos de la chingada. And we use these terms amongst our people, and we don't know that those terms were developed basically to keep us thinking like slaves. More prudent is giving thanks to the destruction of any thought that we are the descendants of these great cultures, and that right now we no longer consider those, and we don't consider ourselves as a linkage to that indigenous culture. And then we put it as the reality is that El Día de la Raza, the day of the October 12th when it's celebrated, and in Mexico right now, October 12th is celebrated, Día de la Raza, Day of the Race. So in essence, we're celebrating our own destruction and acknowledgement and glorification. And so Thanksgiving is it's celebrated in this region of our continent as a way of putting an official seal, an official shut up, you acknowledge this, and go about your own way, and nothing happened. But the most important thing is that it dissolves any culpability for the people of European descent, that their ancestors did anything wrong. And it should be equivalent of the Jewish people celebrating a day where the initial Holocaust of their people started. That's equivalent, and we should think about it that way too as well. And as far as what we're sharing right now, as far as like what we do, like what she does, what Scott is doing, we're trying to be a little bit more aware of what happened in the past, because it's very relevant today, because we don't know our past. I mean, you take the Jewish community, they know their past, right? They have the Jewish schools that teach them who they are as a people. They learn first who they are, then whatever comes after is secondary. But the point is that we should learn, and we should emphasize this to future generations. And the way, when I came in contact with the Mexica movement, with Nelyollotl, I was painting a mural in East LA, and it turned out to be one of the biggest murals so far as pertaining to our history and maybe the whole country. And I myself wasn't aware of all this history. I knew that for some reason, somehow, I was a nationalist, and I said, you know what, anything that's relevant to my history, I'm going to paint. And a lot of things, there was a lot of misinformation that I didn't know myself. I grew up going to an art school in East LA, where I used to hear, and used to look up to artists that were painting things like, that were pretty much irrelevant if you look at it today. And things that I found out through the movement, I started implementing in the mural and going back and changing some of that stuff, and which I'm going to show you later. I mean, you look at the transition, the metamorphosis, I call it, of how I developed this way of thinking, because it's not put out there in the streets like it should be. I mean, we see murals displaying gangs, gang life. We see murals displaying other things that are very irrelevant. But if we look back as far as how is it that we began to develop murals, as far as how the idea of muralism came to be, how is it that muralism came to LA, and why is it that charged pretty much like the movement? Why is it that we created like a movement? Well, sometimes you gotta go trace it back to these first people, the first some of our people that began this. In Mexico they call it el mexicanismo, because that's where really it started. But it started way before also, because we were creating murals, we were creating art. You look at the murals in some of archaeological sites like Bonampak. You look at the murals in Teotihuacan. You look at the many beautiful artwork that was created. And there was this man. His name was Toltecalt. And Toltecalt was in the early 1900s. Toltecalt, if you looked at him, he kind of looked like Karl Marx. Kind of Santa-like. And this man went to Europe, traveled in the late 1800s, early 1900s, traveled to Europe. And he was fascinated with all this stuff. But then when he came back to Mexico, it was during the time of the Civil War that was happening in Mexico, falsely called the Mexican Revolution. And he basically looked around and he said, we don't have anything that gives us pride. And during that time, it was like everything that was celebrated was basically European. Yeah, and here you have a man that is claiming the indigenous part, is claiming his indigenous blood, and who changes his name from a Spanish name to a Nahuatl name. Now, you're talking about the early 1900s? That was unseen. And back then, it was like you were ridiculed if you looked anything indigenous.